Hello and welcome to Chapter 10 of Let's Try Again. This is a Harry Potter oriented fanfiction written by Daydreamer315 on AO3. After the war, Harry Potter's world falls apart. Then he is offered a chance to try and make a better future for himself and his friends. Of course, things are never simple. Please sit back, relax, and enjoy as I read to you Chapter 10 of Let's Try Again. Hogwarts, June 16th, 1996. Severus sat in his office, staring down at a contract. Like they had planned, the goblins had sent a job offer in the middle of May. Now he had the final contract. He knew that if he just signed it, Dumbledore would complain about it. Making a decision, he grabbed the contract and headed to the headmaster's office. If he signed it on the orders of the headmaster, Albus would have no one but himself to blame. Walking up to the office, Severus thought about how much he wanted this to work. He had only managed to get away 3 times since Hadrian had woken up, and he was really missing his husband and son. The bracelets were working and helping Hadrian with his separation anxiety, but it was clear he still really missed him. If this worked, he could go home after the school term and not have to return. Knocking, he waited until he was invited before he entered. The office looked like a disaster zone. There was a reason they had waited until this point to bring out the contract. The Owl and Newt examiners were set to arrive just after dinner to start the exams the next day. There was also a last-minute staff meeting in 10 minutes. Albus would be flustered and rushed, so he would be even less likely to read the contract. "Ah, Severus, my boy, what brings you up here? Has the meeting started already? I do hope I'm not late. I'm just gathering some last-minute things, and then I will be on my way." "No, Albus, the meeting hasn't started yet. I just received the contract from the goblins, and thought I should bring it up." "Ah, good. Have you signed it yet?" "No, not yet. I haven't had the time to read it. I also need a witness." "Well, sign away, and I will sign as witness." "But we haven't read it yet. I really think we should read this first." "It's fine, my boy. When you got the official job offer, I wrote to the goblins and explained what they would have put in the contract. I wanted to make sure that you weren't taken advantage of." Severus barely managed to stop his eyes from rolling. Making sure he wasn't taken advantage of. Sure, this was exactly what he had been hoping for, though. "Okay, I'm done," Severus said as he handed the blood quill that had been provided with the contract to Dumbledore. "Your turn." Dumbledore hissed slightly after he signed and the cuts appeared on the back of his hand. "This is a blood quill. Where did you get a blood quill?" "It was provided with the contract. All goblin contracts are required to be signed in blood," Severus informed him. "Well, now that that's done, we should head off to the staff meeting." The staff meeting had just ended, and no one had had the chance to leave when Argus Filch led James into the room. "Lord Peveril, what a pleasure to see you. But I must ask, what brings you here today?" Albus said grandly. "I'm here to start the negotiations for Severus to join my curse-breaking team." "There is no need, my boy. I had him sign the contract before the meeting, and I witnessed it. It is official. Severus will work with you for the summer, or however long you need him," Albus said with a smile. That smile faded as James gave him a shocked expression. It was actually taking everything for him not to jump for joy. James also noticed that all the teachers were staying in the room to hear what was being said. Most of them looked shocked when Dumbledore had said that Severus was joining a curse-breaking team. Phileas looked particularly interested. But the contract was sent less than 2 hours ago. There is no way you couldn't have gone over it yet. Albus felt a little unnerved when he saw the look on Lord Peveril's face. There was no need. When he got the job offer, I sent the bank a list of what was needed to be in the contract. Once the contract arrived, I had Severus sign it. Before James could say anything, Phileas went off on the headmaster. Are you out of your mind, Albus? Have those lemon drops finally soured your brain? Phileas! That is no way to speak to the headmaster. Minerva almost snarled. It is exactly how to speak to the fool. Phileas snapped back. That is not how goblins work. You can't tell them. You can tell them until you're blue in the face what you want in a contract, but they aren't going to care. The only time that they will take what you want into consideration is during the contract negotiation period. And given that Lord Peveril has just arrived to start the negotiations, it means that the contract you ordered Severus to sign was the contract that the goblins created, with nothing you wanted added. For all we know, you just made Severus sign himself over as a slave. Now, surely, Albus said, his voice slightly unsure. He was starting to realize it might have been better if he had read the contract like Severus had said. I told you, Severus turned on Dumbledore, playing his role to perfection. I told you I hadn't read the contract. I told you we should have read it. But oh no, the great Albus Dumbledore said that he had it handled. Who knows what you have forced me into this time? How many times was I tortured? How many times did I almost die? I risked everything during the last war on your order. And now this? Who knows what is going to happen to me now? I will contact my kin, Severus. I will see if there is anything I can do. Phileas told Severus, though his voice allowed them to hear that he didn't have much hope. If I may, interrupted James, as all heads in the room snapped to him. It is not as bad as you might think. Yes, it is very dangerous to sign a goblin contract without reading it, but the contract was one of mine. I insist that anyone on my team is first presented with a standard contract that I helped to negotiate. We then make changes to suit them. The contract that Severus signed was an amalgamation of the contracts that I negotiated for myself and the other 2 members of our team negotiated for themselves. That's odd, Phileas said. I have never heard of the head of a curse-breaking department, Rockjaw, allowing something like that. James could see that Phileas could be a problem if he wasn't handled properly. That is because Rockjaw wasn't involved. My team and I actually report directly to Ragnarok. Oh! Phileas was stunned. This man could clearly be a very dangerous opponent if angered. The casual way he spoke of Chief Ragnarok actually intimidated the dueling champion. So what can Severus expect? Well, the contract is actually fairly favourable. I won't be able to tell you a great deal of it. There are some strong secrecy rules. One of our other team members insisted on a full secrecy act. I can tell you he will be getting a good wage, 27,000 galleons per year, plus a percentage of what we find. That is not possible. He won't be working with you for a year. He has a teaching contract here, Albus interjected. No, he doesn't. James just smiled at him. The moment you 2 signed that contract, it overrode all other contracts. He is correct, Albus, Phileas said. He was clearly exasperated with the headmaster's actions. Goblin contracts are designed to override almost everything. Actually, James said with a secret little grin to Sev, you said you worked as a spy during the last war. Sev nodded at that. If I'm right, I think that the Goblin contract would override the vow you had to make to get that mark. Sev had known this, of course. They had specifically made sure the contract was worded in a way to hopefully break the vow he had to make to the Dark Lord. He had even felt a slight burning on his forearm after he signed the contract, but hadn't had the chance to check without being noticed. Everyone in the room watched avidly as Severus rolled up his sleeve. Everyone, including both James and Sev, gasped as they saw Sev's pale arm. No trace of the hideous dark mark remained. That's wonderful! Congratulations, Severus! Phileas practically squealed in glee. So, can you tell us anything else about the contract? We are required to have a financial manager that was appointed by the bank for the next 10 years. Ragnarok has already said that he would be willing to take that position. I will be given the responsibility of sitting as proxy for any governmental positions. This was what was mentioned at the request of one of the others. As you know, Headmaster, I have already taken up the position as proxy for that particular house, though the actual house name is sealed by the act of silence. We will be travelling and working all over the world, and we will be expected to abide by the laws of the nation we are in, naturally. Just stuff like that. I really don't know what else I can tell you. I would really suggest that you request a copy of the contract, Severus. I know you can't change it, but it would at least be good to know what to expect. Can you tell us where you will be going and who is on your team? Minerva could see that Albus was at a loss for words, so she tried to give him some time to collect himself. No, James said, a smile once again on his face. Minerva looked like she was about to start pushing for more information when Phileas cut her off. Minerva, he isn't saying no because he is being contrary. If you'll notice, he has only spoken in generalities. That is because he is bound by an act of silence, I assume. James nodded at him. That means that he is incapable of going into specifics. Quite right, Duel Master Flitwick. Since I will not be needed to start the negotiations, I should be off. Now that Severus will be with us for the next 5 years, I will have to make a few adjustments. Good day, everyone. Severus, you will need to be at the bank by 9 a.m. July 1st to start work. Walking over, he shook Sev's hand, making sure to rub his thumb in circles on the back of his hand. Then he left. Once he was gone, all the teachers started talking at once. It was clear that most of them blamed Dumbledore for the situation Severus was now in. They knew how Dumbledore was with contracts, so they all knew that Severus hadn't been given a choice of signing or not. Enough! Albus's magic crackled around him. Severus, Minerva, Phileas, please come with me to my office. We need to speak privately. Headmaster's office. Albus all but stomped into his office like a toddler throwing a temper tantrum. Dropping down in his seat, it was clear just how angry he was when no one even offered a lemon drop. Phileas, tell me how we can renegotiate that contract or cancel it completely. We can't lose our potion professor for 5 whole years. I told those goblins that we could only spare him for the summer, and maybe a month or 2 into next year. Years of practice kept the half-goblin from reacting to the headmaster's callous words. Did you sign using your own quill, or the one they provided? The blood quill they sent, Severus told him, as he took a place leaning against the wall, as Phileas and Minerva had taken the only other seats. Then I'm afraid there is nothing that can be done. If you had only signed in ink, then you may have stood a chance. Not much of one, but a chance nonetheless. Since you signed in blood, there is nothing that can be done. The contract must be fulfilled, exactly as it's written. But surely, Minerva was flustered. Just who did those goblins think they were? It was clearly an underhanded trick. There is nothing that can be done. Goblin contracts are bound in magic and unbreakable. The only way out of this contract would be for Severus to die. Not that I am suggesting that. And even then, the goblins would claim his estate as recompense. Phileas was actually finding this kind of funny. He had at first been extremely nervous that Severus was in true danger, and he would have really tried to help him. But since the contract was an already negotiated contract that others had agreed with, he knew it wouldn't be too bad. This might actually help Severus. Phileas knew that Severus had been forced to sign the teaching contract he had. He hadn't even gotten out of the hospital wing after his illegal stay in Azkaban. That contract was one of the worst he had ever seen. It gave Severus almost no personal freedom and basically enslaved him to the headmaster. Now, he was free. Goblins could be extremely harsh taskmasters, but something told him that Severus was going to enjoy this time. Lord Peveril clearly had sway within the Goblin nation, so the contract was probably one of the best that a wizard could ever hope to achieve with the goblins. Phileas! Phileas pulled himself out of his thoughts to look at the headmaster as he spoke. You seemed surprised that Lord Peveril would be answering to this Rognock rather than Lockjaw. What is the difference? This time, Phileas was almost ready to challenge the old man to a duel. Rockjaw is the head of the curse-breaking department. He is a powerful and influential goblin. Ragnock is the chief of the British branch of the Goblin nation. He is also the king's younger brother. Knowing Rockjaw is one thing, but to be answerable only to Ragnock means that Lord Peveril is very powerful within the Goblin nation. It is basically the equivalent of being answerable only to the Minister of Magic in your terms. So, what can I do? Severus asked. He really didn't need to have Phileas answer the question, as he already knew, but just wanted to rub it in to Albus and Minerva. He was free. He would now have 5 years with his family. He wouldn't even have to consider returning until Hadrian was ready to start his first year. You do what Lord Peveril said. You go to the bank July 1st and begin your new job. Phileas turned his back to Minerva and Albus so they wouldn't be able to see his face, and gave Severus a bright smile before turning back to them. And Albus, Minerva, don't bother asking questions of Severus about his new job. There is no point. And just what do you mean by that? Minerva's back was up. That contract included a full act of silence, like Lord Peveril said. That means that magic will make it impossible for Severus to tell you anything you don't already know. It's like how Lord Peveril couldn't tell you who was on the team or where they were going. If they try to speak of it, Magic will stop them. It will actually close their throats, and they won't be able to breathe until they stop trying to answer. Attempting to write about it will result in muscles in their hand being paralyzed temporarily. Legilimens will result in blackout pain for both parties, and it will get worse every time they try to circumvent the act of silence. It is why most humans that work for the goblins only get involved with others that work for the goblins. They are the only people they can even have a basic conversation with, so long as they don't give specifics. Well, I should be off. I have students to check on. I will be leaving too, Severus said coldly. I will be requesting a copy of the contract tomorrow to see just what my life is going to be like for the next 5 years. Oh, and I will be putting in a request to the school board to have Aurora Sinestra take over as head of Slytherin House in my absence, as she is the only former Slytherin on staff, and she has already started helping me with it to ease my workload while I do the school's brewing. Both Severus and Phileas left after that. Each of them was hiding a smile. When Severus got back to his room, he actually did a small happy dance before he ran to his mirror to call his son and tell him the good news if James hadn't gotten home yet. Albus and Minerva just sat in the office for a few minutes, stunned. This was bad. I warned you, Minerva said. I warned you that we needed to be careful with how we got information on Lord Peveril. Now we have lost Severus for 5 years. We are going to need to find a new potions master too, and there is no guarantee that we will ever be able to get Severus back under control once he returns. We have had him so well trained these last few years, and now he will be running wild for 5 years. Albus grabbed one of the delicate little crystal devices he kept on his desk and threw it against the wall. It calmed him little. Waving his wand, he repaired it and placed it on his desk. Fawkes had screeched when he had thrown it, but Albus paid him no mind. Temporarily calmed, he sat back down and sipped his tea before putting a lemon drop in his mouth. I am aware. I should have realized that the goblins would take advantage of the situation. We really need tougher restrictions on them. This is definitely going to make things difficult over the next few years. Not only are we going to need a new potions professor, but we will also need to make sure that they can gather ingredients and brew all the potions the school needs. There are no other potions masters that I have enough control over to make them agree to that. Severus only agreed because Poppy had him on potions at the time. It is a good thing we now have access to more money for the school. But again, that will bring the goblins into our school as they need to approve everything. And just how are we supposed to get Severus to return after he finishes at the bank? They said that the goblin contract broke his school contract. We will need to get him to sign an entirely new contract, and there is no way you will be able to get him to agree to everything again. I am aware that was going to be difficult, and Albus knew it. We may have one thing working in our favour. 5 years is exactly when the Potter boy is to start here. I made Severus swear an unbreakable vow as a life debt that he would protect the boy. That vow will force him to return. Is that vow still active? I believe so. Life debts are oldie magic. As far as I know, There is nothing that can override it. I will have to check with Severus, but it should still be there. And what are you going to do about the money and the Wizengamot seats? What? Lord Peveril said that they will have to go to the bank appointed financial manager for 10 years. You have been controlling his finances to keep control over him. Now the goblins do. He also said that the unknown seat that he held proxy for was another member of his team. If that was written into the contract, that means he will now also be proxy for the prince seats. You may have managed to overpower Severus's shields to make him forget he was Lord Prince, but the goblins know. Minerva wished that she hadn't said anything as Albus's magic lashed out. He hadn't been paying close enough attention to what they had been saying. The magic was suffocating. Minerva had no choice but to get up and flee the office. Standing outside the closed door, she heard as the headmaster's office was destroyed. Severus's room. After his little happy dance, Severus ran into his room, throwing up privacy wards as he went, and grabbing his mirror, he called home. The first thing he saw when the mirror was activated on the other end was the smiling face of his son. Papa, you're coming home. You're safe from the bad man. I am, my little one. Your daddy did a good job, and now Papa is going to get to come home. But remember, I still have to stay here for another 2 weeks. I will try to come home on weekends. We know, Sev, we have already discussed that, and although we are not overly happy about it, we will be okay. Won't we, Hadrian? James had come up behind his son. Hadrian nodded to James with a slight pout on his face. They talked for about another hour before his wards alerted Severus that someone was at his door. Believing it to be Dumbledore, Severus said goodbye to his family and went into his office. Taking a calming breath, Severus opened the door. Opening the door, he didn't find the headmaster. Instead, he found Bill Weasley. I wasn't aware that we had a study session tonight, Mr. Weasley. We didn't, sir. I was just hoping that I could ask you a few last-minute questions before the exams start. Well then, come in. Going into the office, Severus once again threw up privacy wards. Once the wards were up, Severus watched as the boy visibly relaxed. During the past months, Severus had come to learn that Bill was actually magically sensitive and had mage sight. Bill hadn't even known. He had always known that he could see some of the magic around him, and that he felt it too, but he had just thought that that was what everyone else could do. Severus had to walk him through how to work it. Luckily, he had already had to do the same thing with Hadrian, so he knew what to say. Because Bill lived in a magical home, he had most likely learned to block out most of it as a child to protect himself. Being in a magically active area was actually quite painful for someone with mage sight if they couldn't control it. The more power, the brighter things were. If Bill hadn't learned to block out most of it being in Hogwarts, it would have been impossible for him. The amount of magic would have left him blind by the end of the first week. What is it that you need? Sir, I was just wondering, I honestly don't really know what I'm trying to say. He took a deep breath. Why have you been helping me? From what I've heard, You don't really like students, but here you are, helping me learn in secret. I know that you could get in trouble if we're caught, so why?" Severus didn't know what to say. He knew that he wasn't the nicest of teachers, but Bill was right. He normally wouldn't have bothered to help a student the way he had with Bill. It was mostly down to what he knew Bill would be capable of in the future. "Truthfully, Mr. Weasley, I am indeed not overly fond of many of the students. Potions is an exceptionally dangerous class. I am not mean because I enjoy it. It is to make sure that you all do your best not to screw up because you want to avoid my attention. When I was a student here, we had a professor called Horace Slughorn. He allowed many of the students to fool around and treat potions like it was a joke. When I was in my 3rd year, some of the students were playing around, throwing things into each other's cauldrons. Eventually, one of the cauldrons exploded. The entire class ended up in the hospital wing, and 2 of the students died. It was all covered up, but it doesn't change the fact that we all had to watch them die. I looked it up. In the 34 years Slughorn worked here, 11 students died in his class. I swore when I took on the position that I wouldn't lose any students. And to date, I haven't lost a single student. I haven't even had any of you dunderheads lose a limb. If I have to be seen as cruel and be hated to achieve that, then so be it. You're all alive. As for why I'm helping you, I can see that you have great potential, Mr. Weasley. I am just showing you that there is more out there than what you can learn in a classroom. There is also your father. As many people know, I worked as a spy during the last war. Part of that job meant that I had to do things. I had to hurt people to save people. And I did it. I never killed or tortured anyone, but I did terrify and terrorize them to keep my cover. Your parents were both a part of the organization that I was working for at the time. Most of the people there looked down on me. They hated me for what I did, even though that never stopped them from using the information I got. I was treated with suspicion and hatred by most, except your father. He never once looked down on me. He never treated me with anything but respect, and always made sure to ask how I was doing or if I needed anything when I was hurt. I guess this is my way of repaying him for his kindness during a very dark time in my life. Bill just sat there. He had, of course, heard the rumors that the potions master had been a Death Eater, but he had just thought that they were rumors. The teachers would never allow a Death Eater to teach them, but this was something he never would have suspected. He had been a spy. He had risked his life every day, and people looked down on him for it. This man should be heralded as a hero. Instead, he was scorned and reviled. His own mother talked about this man like he was scum. Bill had always wondered why his father always stopped his mother from saying anything bad about Snape when he was there. It was clear that his father respected him, while his mother looked down on him. But the fact was simple. To Bill, from this point on, Snape was a hero. Thank you. There is no need to thank me, Mr. Weasley. I have just been doing my job. Now, it is good that you came to see me. I know that you are planning to continue on with your secret studies, but you will have to find somewhere else to work. Huh? Do you not want to help me anymore? Not at all, Mr. Weasley. I told you about my curse breaker friends earlier. Well, I have been recruited to work as a curse breaker for the next few years. By the time I finish out my contract, you would have already graduated." "Wow, sir! That's so cool! You're so lucky. I've actually been considering applying to be a curse breaker once I graduate. But I don't know what you need to be accepted, and I don't want to go to Professor McGonagall. I don't think she could really help me with it. She spends too much time with my mum, and Mum won't listen to anything I say. She wants me to work for the ministry, and that's that. It doesn't really seem to matter to her what I want. But where can I study? I really don't want to stop. I've only just started." Severus sat back. He had actually become fond of Bill. He was a good kid, a bit foolish and reckless, but no worse than many others. He knew that he was being far more blunt than was necessarily wise, but he wanted to trust the boy. It also didn't matter all that much anymore if Bill ran off and told on him. Then an idea came to him. "Mipsy!" A house elf in a little dress-like uniform in red and black popped into the room. Bowing slightly at Severus, she spoke in a high-pitched voice. "Master called Mipsy?" Mipsy was one of the Potter elves that was currently working at the school. Severus knew that she was loyal to himself, his husband, and his son. The little elf had no loyalties to Hogwarts or anyone else inside the castle, so she would never betray the secret. "Mipsy, this is Bill Weasley. He is going to be studying independently in the come-and-go room over the next 2 years. I want you to keep an eye on him. If he needs anything, within reason, I want you to get it for him. If at any point he is injured, I want you to tend to it. If the injury is too severe for you to fix, you will take him directly to the hospital wing. Am I understood?" "Yes, Master. Mipsy be understanding." With that, Mipsy popped away. "What was that about? Why was she dressed that way? None of the Hogwarts elves that I have seen have uniforms like that." Bill was confused. He had never heard of a place called the come-and-go room. Mipsy is not a Hogwarts elf. Mipsy is actually a Potter elf. The Potters felt that the elves should be allowed to wear proper uniforms and be treated well. After the loss of their master, James Potter, they were sent here. As for what it was about, there is a room in the castle that is known as the come-and-go room, or the room of requirement. It can become anything you want it to be, and it will hide you from everyone. If you practice in there, no one need ever know. The room is up on the 7th floor, across the hall from the tapestry of Barnabas the Balmy. Just walk past that section of the wall, thinking about what you need, and the door will appear. If you don't want anyone to find you, the door will disappear after you enter, so no one can see it. That's so cool. If that is everything, Mr. Weasley, you should be off. Oh, before you go, to be a curse breaker, Mr. Weasley, you need our newts in charms, ancient runes, defense against the dark arts, warding, and arithmancy. You will also need a minimum of EE in transfiguration, potions, history, and herbology. If you can achieve those grades, you will have to apply to the bank, where, if accepted, you will then need to go through a minimum of 2 years of training. There are also a few other newts that you could study on your own, like you do with warding, that could improve your chances. Those include spellcrafting and spell weaving. It is not a job for those that aren't willing to put in the work. Now, off with you. Hogwarts, June 29th, 1996. The previous 2 weeks had been hectic. Normally Severus would stay a week into the summer to clean up his labs and make sure everything was out of the common room. Now he had to have everything packed and ready to go tomorrow. Severus had never wanted to smile more. All the exams were done, and the students would be boarding the train in less than 3 hours. There would be one last staff meeting, though he really didn't understand why he was required to attend. It was only a few more hours until he could go home. But now, those few hours felt like a lifetime. Everyone seemed to have last-minute things to do, and were running around like fools, both teachers and students. Severus just wanted them gone. He wanted to be gone. He had his own family to see now. Eventually, he gathered his snakes. He had already explained to them that he wouldn't be back next year. Many did not like that fact. While most of the teachers at least tried to be fair, it had always fallen to Severus to balance out the prejudice that the snakes received. They knew, with him gone, they didn't stand a chance at the House Cup. As he escorted them down to the train, he found himself to actually be slightly sad. There was no denying that he was overjoyed to be leaving, but on some level, he was going to miss these children. He had been teaching at the school for 4 years now, and had watched them grow. He actually felt slightly paternal to them, but he knew that Aurora was more than capable of looking after them. When it came time for the meeting, Severus all but apparated himself into the staff room. Once this was done, he could go home. The meeting really didn't cover anything new. Instead, they just went over everything they needed to do to close down the school for the summer over the next week. But since Severus had asked to leave early, he had already done his parts. It was at the end of the meeting that Albus started saying things that concerned Severus. Now that is all done, we need to discuss the students that were removed by the DCW. We need to keep an eye on them. I know that we won't have much, if any, contact with them during this summer, so they are going to need to be watched when they return. Of course, Headmaster, Poppy said. She was still angry that the healers from St. Mungo's had come into her domain. She had been treating the students of this school for over 30 years. Who did they think they were, coming into her ward like she was some newbie? During the first week of June, the healers James had arranged for from St. Mungo's had come and conducted health checks. Now, when the students got off the train at King's Cross, 13 of them were being met by the newly hired staff of the Seacliff House. There were also another 29 students who would be receiving a home visit from the DCW over the summer. The students hadn't shown any signs of major injuries that would require immediate removal, but there had been some warning signs in the questionnaire that the Mind Healer staff had all the students fill out. Why? Pomona Sprout was confused by this idea. Because, obviously, we need to make sure that they are not being exposed to a negative environment and corrupted, Minerva said. I don't think we need to worry about something like that. Some of these children are going to be the first safe home they have ever had. If an abusive home didn't corrupt them, I'm sure a safe home won't. Phileas had always known that Albus and Minerva were trying to sway the children to their viewpoint. We don't know the kind of people that will be put in charge of them. For all we know, it could be someone dark, Albus said in a grave tone. Well, actually, I know at least one of the people on staff. I have stayed in touch with some of my former students. I often receive letters and Yule cards from them. One of my former students, Miss Grove, let me know that she was offered a job there. She is actually one of the ones that will be picking up the students at the train station. I made sure my badgers that were going there knew that they could talk to her if they needed help. Is there any way you could get us some information on who will be working there? Albus asked, his eyes twinkling. Unfortunately, no. As all we now know, Goblin contracts are unbreakable, and the DCW insisted that all the staff all sign one to ensure the children's privacy, Pomona said. They had gotten the joy of listening to Albus and Minerva try and fail to break or get around Severus's new contract. Every time they failed, they would then rant at everyone for a while, before they would try again. Albus was trying to force himself to remain calm. Nothing was going his way anymore, and he knew exactly why. Lord Peveril. How he hated that man. That one man had made a mess of Albus's world. Albus had been well on his way to ridding their world of that horrible dark magic. He really didn't know why anyone was even allowed to be born with a dark core. They should be gotten rid of at birth. He knew that most people would never support an idea like that, but it was what needed to be done. Dark magic needed to be removed for their world to prosper. Ever since Sebastian Peveril entered the Wizengamot, all his plans had been thrown into disarray. Now he was forced to allow more dark-cored students in his school. It was bad enough that he had to allow the children with dark cores from wealthy families in. If things didn't start going his way soon, the school would become a training ground for those sorts of people. As Albus had been thinking, the meeting had been called to a close, and all the teachers were getting ready to go back to what they had been doing before. Severus was headed to the door. It was time for him to go home. "Severus, my boy, I need a word," Albus said as he snapped back to reality. "Albus, I honestly don't see what we need to talk about." Severus was annoyed. He had no intention of putting up with this old man anymore. He was done. "You have tried to get my new contract cancelled. You have failed. It's done. I have already told you, yes, the life debt you made me swear to is still active. I will be forced to do everything I can to protect Hadrian Potter. But due to the specific wording of the vow you made me make, that does not come into effect until he comes to Hogwarts. As of the end of this meeting, I am finished working here at Hogwarts. I have packed everything up and made sure the common room is clean, and told Aurora everything she needs to know to be the head of house. I am done. I am leaving, and there is nothing that you or anyone can do. Now I have somewhere to be. Goodbye, everyone. It has been an interesting few years." With that, Severus walked out of the staff room, and then out of the castle, walking down the road to the front gates and towards Hogsmeade. As soon as he was a foot outside the gates, he apparated to the bank, before going on to flew to Peveril Manor. Severus didn't even manage to get out of the fireplace before Hadrian was in his arms. The small boy just kept sobbing. "You're home. You're safe. You don't have to go back." "Yes, I'm home, little one, and I won't have to leave you again. We can finally be a real family," Severus said as he held his son in a tight hug. Seeing this, James, Sirius, and Remus joined in the hug. The house elves came to check why the masters hadn't left the flu room 10 minutes later and found them all in a group hug, sitting on the floor. Smiling, they left the happy humans to their reunion. Oh yes, they thought, life was so much better now. Thank you for listening to Chapter 10 of Let's Try Again. I hope you have enjoyed, and I will see you next time for Chapter 11. Goodbye.